Trade talks with China moving closer to the finish line as U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin plan to travel to Beijing next week. Latest rounds of face-to-face talks comes after weeks of conference calls between the two nations who are looking to find a path to normalize trade relations. Now, according to news reports, any new deal is likely to include increased purchases of American goods from the Chinese, and this would include ag commodities. Now, China does appear ready to step up their purchases as a means to help reduce the U.S. trade deficit, which hit a record $419 billion last year. China is stepping up their purchases of U.S. pork, sorghum, and soybeans. For pork purchases, Chinese buying from the U.S., that despite import tariffs of 62% imposed on the product. Beijing fighting the trade issue with the U.S. as the country is also battling African swine fever that's led to more than 1 million head of hogs in China being culled. Now, just last week, China purchased 5.2 million bushels of soybeans and 2.5 million bushels of sorghum from American farmers. Well, Nebraska cattlemen working hard to assist the cattlemen and women there dealing with tragedy and flooding by launching a disaster relief fund. Recent snow and flooding have wreaked havoc on Nebraska's livestock industry, causing damage and losses for countless producers across the state. Now this new fund will help Nebraska's cattle producers who are suffering. That's according to Mike Drennan, Nebraska Cattlemen President. Nebraska Cattlemen Disaster Relief Fund is organized in Nebraska as a not-for-profit corporation. And again, to donate, it's 1-800-831-0550. 1-800-831-0550. And finally, USDA announcing this week the results of a comprehensive life cycle analysis, quantifying the resource use and the various environmental emissions of beef cattle production in the United States. Now, the goal was to establish baseline measures that the U.S. beef industry can use to explore ways of reducing its environmental footprint while improving sustainability. USDA found that through this research, greenhouse gas emissions were not all that different from what other credible studies had shown, and that the cattle industry is not a significant contributor to long-term global warming. Well, according to the study, the 7 regions' combined beef cattle production accounted for 3.3% of all U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. By comparison, transportation and electrical generation together made up 56% of the total in 2016, while agriculture, when combined across all sectors, totaled just 9%. Also, cattle only consume 2.6 pounds of grain per pound of beef. That's comparable to both pork and poultry. Well, with another Ag News update, I'm Tony St. James.